Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session titled Generative AI and Instructional Design. As you can see, this doesn't look like a typical slideshow. We utilized a microsite format, so you can click the link in the description of this video to explore on your own. There are many interactive elements that enable you to take a deeper dive based on the topics discussed. In this module, we're going to cover 4 big ideas. One are some of the basic terms for discussing generative AI. The next 2 are for the use cases and boundary conditions of the utility of generative AI in education. And then the final section of this presentation will be a live demo of Eduaide.AI, an instructional tool that uses large language models to aid teachers in instructional planning and lesson development. My name is Thompson. I'm a middle school social studies teacher and a co-founder and the chief executive officer at Eduaide.AI. My background is in the study of educational technology, where I researched open educational resources as tools for closing disparities in access to high-quality instructional materials. It is in this study that my team and I found large language models, or maybe generative AI more broadly, to be useful tools in addressing this same concern: access to high quality instructional materials. To get started, let's cover some basic terms. Generative AI are systems that have the ability to create novel, that is, new outputs, whether those outputs be text, image, audio, or some other form of data. They're able to do this by learning patterns and structures from a data set during training. Eduaide.AI, for example, is built using large language models, specifically OpenAI's API, but we are model agnostic, so we can flip between different large language models quickly and at a click of a button. So large language models are a class of AI models that are designed to understand and generate human language text. And that means they engage in natural language processing, which Russell and Norvig describe in their 1994 book as a way to enable the machine to communicate in human language, and does this through machine learning and transformer architectures, which enable it to adapt to new circumstances and to detect and extrapolate patterns. Some of the characteristics of large language models, of course, are their scale, the large number of parameters they are trained on that enable them to reflect intricate patterns and nuances in language. However, there are limitations. The pre-training process, where models are using massive amounts of text data, which means they learn to predict the next word in a sentence or to fill in a missing word by analyzing billions of sentences from various sources and like contexts. Large language models, therefore, have no understanding of our physical world and only act on the abstraction of language. But that still has wonderful uses. The use cases in education, of course, are the intelligent tutoring systems, the provision of effective feedback, the enabling of personalized learning, and, of course, translation and accessibility services. Intelligent tutoring would mean that the model responds to the inputs of students and measures whether or not the students are meeting certain instructional objectives as set, and then engaging students in deliberate practice to meet those objectives. Effective feedback, well, we understand effective feedback to be feedback that is specific, actionable, and timely. The use of generative AI enables student work to be input, feedback to be generated, and then given back to the student in a quickly and timely fashion. Personalized learning comes in the form of creating instructional content that is aligned to your unique contexts. These aren't canned pieces of content that come from commercial resources, but rather are flexible resources created in collaboration between the teacher and the instructional design model, which might be, again, an app built on the OpenAI API or some other maybe more education-specific fine-tuned model. And that takes me to the boundaries. There are limitations to foundation models, and they are not I would say, necessarily useful in the educational context, and fine-tuning and embedding is a necessary step, as well as making platforms that become clearinghouses for various models that do different things well. Ethan Mollick described it well in a recent article as the affordances of generative AI being like a jagged crown, meaning some things that you might consider to be within the ability or capability of an AI are not, even though they are of similar difficulty as other tasks in which they excel. So you have to be conscious of your task phrasing and of the problem that you are trying to solve, and whether or not those issues and tasks are within the uses, within the capabilities of AI. When you're evaluating education-facing AI, there are some basic questions it seems useful to ask. First is around pedagogical quality. Next, we look at the reliability and replicability of outputs, the transparency of the service, and whether or not they are open with which models they use, data privacy and security, how your data is of course used, and whether or not these models ask for, retain, or record any student personally identifiable information, so whether or not education AI platforms are COPPA and FERPA compliant. There are of course questions around accessibility, adaptability, and then principles and ethics that are worth considering, and you can again dive much deeper into this site by clicking on these variety of links, expanding the different data that we provide, and of course, exploring around. So at Eduaide, before creating any new resource, we ask ourselves whether the material could be used to A, create or improve the conditions for learning, or help learners understand new ideas, retain knowledge, apply knowledge, build expertise, or whether or not these platforms serve, whether or not these resources serve to motivate learners, measure learning, or optimize feedback. And with that, we could dive a little bit into Eduaide.AI.
Are you ready to revolutionize your professional learning? It's time to ignite your passion with EduMatch. Inspire, connect, and grow. Access over 150 professional learning facilitators and explore a wide range of educational topics. This is not just professional development, this is a movement. Discover how EduMatch can support your school or district. Connect with us today and make a world of difference for your students. To learn more, visit us online at edumatch.org.
The presentation left off with a discussion of the boundaries of generative AI in education. Hallucinations and biases seem to be the two chief concerns in this regard. Hallucinations being when models generate text, images, or other content that doesn't have a direct connection to reality or doesn't follow logical or coherent patterns. Textual hallucinations would be the greatest concern on a platform like Eduaide, where the text is disjointed or incoherent or deviates significantly from the input or the expected context. One such example was where a researcher gave ChatGPT a fake URL that contained meaningful keywords, and the response seemed valid at first, but it summarized an article that didn't exist. So hallucinations can be both apparent and subtle. One way to address this, one way to mitigate this concern, is through modular design. Through understanding this jagged crown of affordances that is generative AI and playing to the strengths, understanding where the strengths lie, and creating resources that align to those understandings. On Eduaide, our resources are all small, meaning they can be stacked and shaped to give teachers control over the pace and path and sequence of instruction. We do this through a content generator where the teacher can create planning documents, information objects, and then engage students in independent practice, cooperative learning, gamified learning, or of course, formative and summative assessment questions to track whether or not students are meeting instructional objectives. Modularity comes in the form of these collapsible cards where teachers can create new resources without the fear that they're going to bleed into one another, that they are going to kind of get messy as they have in previous iterations of Eduaide. We've also included these suggested pairs where you can then build a sequence of instruction on the same objective. For instance, 3 deep questions to engage students in meaning making and effortful thinking. How did the invention of the printing press revolutionize the way information and ideas were shared and spread during the time period? What were some of the key societal changes that occurred as a result of the widespread availability of printed materials? In what ways did the printing press continue the growth and development of literature and the arts during the Renaissance? These resources are all automatically saved to your saved content drive, where you can manage all your generated content in one place. We can filter them by type, by last modified, by name, and of course you can sort them into different classes. Jumping back, we also give teachers granular control, which is a second key idea. Granular control means that you can go into these generative outputs on the same platform and have the ability to play with them, to take a piece, remove it, move it around, put it back in, turn these into multiple choice questions. For example, you could highlight this text, you could right click, you can add a multiple choice question. You could say, take the whole thing and translate it to Spanish. So then you have a Spanish version of the informative text. You can say chunk the text or extract keywords from it. So you can provide students with glossaries of key terms and other necessary instructional pieces. This is only the tip of what Eduaide offers. And we encourage you all to jump in and take a look and see what's on the site. But at base, this addresses some of the major issues addressed in our presentation.